All right, Project ARK. Hello, everyone. This is our fourth session, also known as ARK003, where we start, pick up where we left session last week. We were basically trying to put together, we were initializing a mobile application, putting in the pipeline. We ran a little bit into a little hiccup, but that's totally fine because it's important. When I was talking to Greg after the session, he said to me, it's good. It's important that people see that when you are building software, you're gonna run into issues, live stream or not, and you're gonna have to kind of scratch your head and think like, how do I manage this problem? How do I work around this problem? So you get to see live um, how how we basically kind of run the system, how we kind of make the system kind of work the way we want it to work, but also see, how, like it's okay for you to run into an issue. It's okay for you to run into a problem and and to be able to manage around it, but you also saw like the emotional ups and downs of working with a problem, right? So you try to solve a problem, you reach to the point of desperation, and then you go back and say, well, maybe I should just quit. Should I quit? Should I just step away and come back? Never quit. Software engineering is all about patience, persistence, perseverance. Sometimes you're going to feel really, really silly and stupid, but if you can power through that and get over, that feeling and continue to push through, great things will happen. Um, so I'm getting kind of Bryce. Hi, Bryce. Long friend, long time. Happy to see you on the stream. Let's get and thank you for everyone who's been following and asking questions. Thank you to everyone who's been cloning the code, contributing to the code. Needless to say, Greg and everyone else involved. Thank you for helping out and making sure that we can build truly free, truly open, truly standardized and test-driven a piece of software, a mobile app and a backend API with the pipelines, with the deployments, with everything. I haven't shown you the deployment part yet, but we'll get to that real quick. Hi, Mazen. Nice to meet you. Thank you for coming into the stream. Okay, so let's go back to the architecture real quick. Where were we, right? So we, remember when we started the session. For those who have not been following from the beginning, we basically said we're gonna build a mobile app called ARK, Acts of Random Kindness. And what this mobile app does is that people will open up their phones. They're gonna download the app, install the app, and then they're going to open up the app, and the app is basically going to tell them, hey, here is an idea for an act of random kindness that you can do today, right? So we're basically digitizing kindness, and we're turning it into a social movement, right? So you start by knowing what act you want to do today and whatnot. The next iteration of the app, V2, would be log in, post your experience about doing that act of random kindness. And then phase three, allowing people to kind of communicate with each other and inspire each other to do something cool. And in the beginning of this series, this should be a short series but very long sessions, because I really want to power through this entire project, and I want to get something out there in the open source space. We said we want a database, we want a backend API, and we want a mobile app, right? According to the standard, everything in the world has a dependency, purpose, and an exposure layer, and that's basically what this is. And last time we started working, we built together a backend API, like a storage broker and a service. And the service, we test driven all of this. We built the infrastructure for it, the pipeline, and then we started building an API broker, something that we'll call an endpoint. So this guy will basically call this endpoint. So this method here will be basically calling this route, right? And it will basically gonna try and basically pull, acts of random kindness from it. And then the plan is to basically be able to go and say, I want to render that. I want to render all these acts of random kindness, on the mobile app. And we stopped at building a broker and an ARK service. And today we're going to start working on the ARK View service, right? And I'm going to talk a little bit about what an ARK View service is in a second. And then we maybe, if time allows, we start building these components and actually get an actual mobile app running. If you're not sure, I dropped in the description of this video, if you're watching this on YouTube, I dropped in the description of this video the links to both the API and the mobile app. So please go in there and check it out. You're gonna be able to see all the links that you need to kind of check out the code at building it, because we're building it one pull request at a time. Intentionally, I want to show you the progression of this app and how things work and whatnot. Before I get started, I just want to kind of point out something really cool I saw recently, and I want people to kind of see it. There's this gentleman. His name is Ahmed Khalil. He basically developed something really cool where you basically, if you go into your GitHub, right? You have ARK API, and you have all the code in here. If you just change the word GitHub to the word Git diagram and hit enter, he basically generates, using AI, he generates a diagram for whatever you've built. Okay, so he's showing here the database, all the brokers that we built. He calls it infrastructure layer for some reason, and then service layer, and then API layer, and then all the exceptions, including the CI/CD pipeline. I think that's pretty cool. I think that's pretty cool. So I'm gonna drop this in the comment section just for people who want to try this with their own open source repos. I think that's pretty cool. This and Gorse are basically my favorite. His GitHub repo has 12,000 stars on it. It's open source. It's not really magical. What he's like he's not hiding away what this is doing. Go and check out Ahmed's amazing product. I think it's a pretty cool one. Okay, now let's get to business, right? Okay, view services. First of all, it's important for you to understand what the view service is and why they're important. View services, their main responsibility is to take the raw domain model. Let's say you have a domain model called a student, or an ARK model in this instance, which is this ARK model, a GUID and a datetime offset and a string, which is the act. And it basically mold it and form it in a new model that is fit for the UI. Because your UI is not always going to be interacting directly with your domain model, and it shouldn't be. You should be molding and forming your data in the way that fits your UI. I'll give you an example just for educational purpose. Let's say, for instance, you have a student model like this. And this student model has maybe an ID, maybe a first name and a last name, first name and a last name, like that. Okay. And this first name, last name, the UI that you want to render this student model based out on is basically something that says name, which is the full name, and it's expecting to have something like, Kailu Hu, for instance, like that. So this is basically the name. It doesn't care whether you have first name, last name. It doesn't care about that. What a lot of the developers out there will do is that they're going to go add that logic of concatenating first name, last name in the UI, because where else would they do it, right? It makes sense for them, because they would go here and basically write the code that looks like this. It'll be like student dot first name like this, plus maybe put a space in there, so and then plus again student last name, like that. So that's how they go and write the code to make sure that this works, right? That's actually a bad idea, because your UI shouldn't be doing any logic. It shouldn't be doing any concatenation of data. It shouldn't be doing anything related to the data that's coming through. It should just take the model and render the model. You want to keep that exposure layer as dumb and thin as possible, because if you do that, that basically means later you can actually replace that UI model. You can use it in a desktop application or a mobile application or a web application. It doesn't matter what application you use it with, and not have to worry about carrying on that baggage of business logic or data processing in your component. But how do we solve that problem, right? You have a student, and then this student has a first name, last name, but this model really wants a student name. It doesn't care about first name, last name. This gives the birth and the reason to have something called student view model. And that student view model has something called name, right? And the service that's doing the conversion between these two models is called a view service. So this view service is sitting right here, this view service right here. So let's call it student view service. What it does is that it picks up that model from the lower dependency, which is your foundation service or orchestration service, whatever service that's serving that domain model, and it turns it into a student view. That student view, it basically picks up that data, does the conversion for it. It's purely data-based service. It doesn't know anything necessarily about the UI that's going to render it. It just knows that it needs to have this particular view formed and manufactured in this way. Of course, this is a super simplified description of what a view service does. It can get a lot more complex than that, like especially if they're doing writes, if you're doing reads, if you're doing permissions. Your view service takes care of the back end of the front end. It's truly the BFF, the back end of the front end. That's basically what this view service is all about. But you have to also understand, like there are cases where this view service is just there. It's basically picking up student model to view model, and they're both exactly the same, which drives some engineers crazy. Be like, okay, if the student view is exactly the same as the student domain, why do I need to work with a view service? Why do I need to do that? Well, the answer is simple. It's because you will not have that opportunity. Like once you start building more and more services in your view service, in your component, and suddenly your component needs a new type of model to work with, you're going to have to redo all that work, right? You're going to have to go and redo all that work if you hook up your model directly or UI directly to your domain service. That's not the right thing to do. You shouldn't be doing something like that. So that's why a view service exists, right? A view service exists to kind of give you that abstraction level to go and say, hey, you know, between the domain model and the view model, I'm going to do a conversion. Even if it's just symbolic conversion, I'm going to do that simple conversion that will basically make sure that there's a separation between your domain model, the model that's coming from the outside world, and the view model that's baked and shaped specifically to fit that particular component. So this ARK component knows how to manage it and work with it and all that kind of fun stuff. Okay. It's a little bit more work, especially in, you know, if you don't have the immediate need for something like that, but it's very important if you're building sustainable, maintainable, test-driven systems. All right, we have a hello from a LinkedIn user. Hello, LinkedIn user. Nice to meet you. I don't know why LinkedIn is not showing their actual name, but that's fine. Maybe their name is LinkedIn user. Maybe their family is super enthused about LinkedIn, and that's why they called him LinkedIn. We don't know. Okay, so let's start with creating a branch for the view service. So I'm going to kind of pull latest in here. Okay, I got the latest. And then I'm going to start kind of creating users, Hassan Habib, views, right? This is a view service, and this is an ARK view service, and then this is retrieve all. You can't see the branch, but really your branch names have to have very specific naming conventions. These naming conventions will basically help others who are trying to contribute to this project work with you and kind of help out with it. Mazen says, loved the idea and want to contribute. What should I go through to start contributing in this project? You mentioned the standard on your GitHub. Is that all you need? Yeah, if you read the standard and you understand the standard, the best way to learn the standard is to practice the standard, right? And if you want to link the link, if you really type the standard and then Hassan Habib, it will show up in Google, because we've been doing that. This is pretty much like my life's work, is to basically just to make sure that there's a standard for software. But, you know, in case you can't find it, it's definitely right here. You can, you know, I dropped it here in the chat and I'm going to share it here on the screen. So it's basically github.com/Hassan Habib / the standard. I need a tiny URL for that one. So maybe that's standard.com or something like that. I'm pretty sure that one is taken. And thank you, Mazen, for offering to contribute to this project. It's really a huge project. It has a lot of good impact, but also it's going to need a lot of maintenance, right? Because it's a mobile app. Every now and then there's a new version of iOS and a new version of Android. If you want to maintain a mobile app, you really want to make sure that there's enough contributors, around the community and the repository that make sure to keep things up to date, upgrading .NET, making sure if there are any security issues, if there's outages. I want to kind of introduce the idea of open DevOps. So anyone in the open source community can continue to help and maintain on the backend server of that, which is kind of wild, right? Because that's where you don't want anyone to have access. But what if the DevOps project itself is open source? What if the resource themselves are open source? I need to think a little bit about that concept. But anyway, let's get started. Where do we start? We start with the views. So I'm gonna go here and say views, and then in here I'm gonna create a new folder. I'm gonna call it ARK views. And then I'm going to create an ARK view model. Let's go and do that. ARK view. Like I said, there are cases where it's identical, but I'm going to teach you about something even more interesting about test-driven development today. If you can be patient enough through this, I promise you're going to learn something interesting today. Okay, so what was the ARK thing? So date time, offset, I think we called it date, and then the act itself, which is a string, right? That's all in there. It's identical to the domain model. ID, date, act, ID, date, act. But is it always going to be like that? Absolutely not. It's not always going to be like that, for a lot of reasons and for performance reasons and so many different things. Okay, what do we want to build here? I want to build a view service. So I'm just going to create a new folder and call it views, right? And under views, I want to build a model called ARK views, right? And then under that, I'm going to create an interface. I'm going to call it ARK view service. So that's an interface because we're going to do dependency injection, a lot of fun things along the way. The ARK view service will have a value task of a list of ARK view. And then I'm going to say retrieve all ARK views async. Super easy. All that's going to do is going to just give me a bunch of ARK views, right? And then render that, give that to a carousel on the front end, right? And then just start rendering it. And then we can just swipe through it. I'll show you all of that hopefully today. I need a concrete class for this. So this is ARK view service. And here's the copyrights, and then ARK view service. I'm going to implement the interface. So what kind of dependencies I have here? Well, I have private read-only ARK service, which is the foundation service. So this is ARK service. I have an logging broker. So I have a logging broker right here. And then I'm going to basically highlight these two. Control period. I'm going to generate the constructor CTOR for this. All right. And now I have a simple view service ready to go. All right. This is a simple view service ready to go. We're going to need to write some unit tests for it, right? We need to establish the unit test project because you can't just go here and start doing, oh, well, that's very simple. Return await this .ark service retrieve all ARK. That'd be very easy and you'd be done with the day, right? But that's not what we're doing here. We're test driving this. We're writing this in a way that's truly maintainable and testable. So I'm going to show you in a second what that means. I worked with some folks that will tell me, Hassan, even though you know this code is going to be removed, you still want to make it standard compliant because we keep track of the commit history. I'm totally fine with that. No problem. Let's take some questions before we start writing some tests. Dinesh says, Hassan, how do you think of problems, solutions when you're really stuck? I mean, sometimes nothing works and you start losing it, losing on it. What is that which keeps you trying to think of it differently? Well, first of all, number one thing, don't solve a problem that you're not wholeheartedly invested in. If you're not invested into the problem that you're trying to solve, you're probably not going to find a solution. But let's just say you're working at a company and they're telling you to work this problem, to solve this problem, and you just don't know, what to do with it, and you're not necessarily like emotionally invested in it, but it's your job and you have to do it. Well, number one, you're going to have to find someone who's passionate about this problem, someone that we call a SME, like a subject matter expert. And a subject matter expert doesn't have to actually know about the domain necessarily, but it could be someone who just a good problem solver, right? Some people are like a natural athlete, right? Someone who can play basketball, football. There's the exact same thing in the engineering industry, just someone who likes to solve problems in general, regardless what these problems are. You're going to want to network and know about people. You're going to run it by seasoned people, seasoned engineers. You can always ask AI, as long as you don't share private internal information with AI, that's a great option. But also it also helps if you step away from the problem. Like if you find yourself stuck for an hour and you just can't get through with it, don't be stubborn. It's just not the time for you to figure out the solution for this problem yet. It's time for you to kind of step out, kind of walk away, try, just meet with some friends, go drink some coffee, just go for a walk, just do something else and let your internal subconscious mind work that problem out. That's basically how I do it. All right. Anjuman says hello from Pakistan. Hello, Anjuman. Thank you for joining our stream. Okay, let's write some unit tests. Who's excited about unit tests? I'm excited about unit tests. So I'm gonna create a folder down here. I'm gonna call it views. And then under views, I'm gonna call the folder ARK views. And then I'm gonna start writing some tests. So this is ARK view service tests. Now bear with me on this one. This one is heavy. Like what I'm about to share with you is heavy and very hard to comprehend at the beginning. So you probably want to kind of give yourself a little bit of time to think through this, right? The setting up of this unit test is easy, but the concept that I'm about to introduce to you is very important, right? And I'm going to tell you where that concept came from and why it's important. So private, read only, and I have a mock of ARK service. So this is ARK service mock right here. And then private read only, and we're going to mock the logging broker because we want to throw exceptions at some point. So this is logging broker mock like this. And then the service, the actual service that I'm trying to build. So this is ARK view service. This is ARK view service right here. I'm going to create a constructor, but I'm not going to pass those as dependencies because this is a unit test, right? So you're going to actually instantiate those in your constructor as you're building the system, right? So let's do this. This that ARK service mock. Here's a mocker for ARK service. Let's do the logging broker mock. So here's new logging broker mock, and then let's instantiate our actual ARK view service, which is this one. New ARK view service. This is your constructor. And then what do you have? An ARK service. This dot ARK service mock dot object, and then logging broker. This dot logging broker mock dot object like this. Okay. So far so good. This is just like how we do everything. But here's where it gets a little crazy, right? You can't listen to me very well on this one. You can't have your unit test repeat the exact same logic of your method. Okay, you can't go and say, well, my method is converting A to B, so I'm gonna build my expected and my actual by converting A to B. Like copying the exact same logic in your unit test is not good test-driven development practice. Why is that? Because if you tightly couple your unit test with the logic that leads to the results of that unit test, if that logic change, you have a broken system, right? Because the logic itself can change all the time. Like how you solve a problem can change. Repeating that logic in your unit test is not a good idea. So to simplify things a little bit, let's go to the blackboard again, and I'm going to show you some fun stuff. So when you're implementing, let me show you this. So when you're implementing a unit test, you have to start from the result, which is basically the equivalent of your expected, right? And basically verify your logic. So you're starting from the result and basically verifying logic that has happened, that this logic have led to that result. So you basically build the expected and see the actual, and you work your way there. That's your unit test flow. That's unit test flow. You start from the result, right? The logic flow, which is what you're testing, is the opposite of that. The logic flow here, you actually start from the logic and you work your way down to the result, which is the actual. See, this is your result, which is the actual, like that. So your unit test method cannot have the same logic. It can't work the same logic that your method is doing, because you have to establish the expected and then let the subject of your test kind of do all that work to reach to that result. Okay, so there is an ancient law called Euclid's law of axioms. And Euclid's law of axioms says things that are equal to the same thing are equal to each other. Okay, what that means is that if you have a thing in here, and if you have a value A and value B, and if value B is an equivalent to the thing and A is equivalent to the thing, then A and B are equal to each other. Things that are equal to the same thing are equal to each other, right? It's obvious, right? If two things are equal to the same thing, then obviously they should be equal to each other. What's this have to do with the prices of tea in China, right? This is the same concept that's gonna drive how we're gonna test drive the mapping of the domain model to some dynamic domain entity and then extract the result off of it. Okay, so we're gonna create the result first, and then we're gonna work our way down to build the actual. How are we gonna do that? Let's do it together. Okay, so what I really need is the thing, which is the thing that I'm going to extract the results from. How do I build that? Well, remember in previous tests, we went and basically said, oh, just create a filler in here, and that filler will be enough, right? In this case, we can't actually do a filler anymore. We need something that returns a list of dynamic objects. I'll show you here, private, static, list of dynamic objects, and then I'm gonna go and say create ARK properties. Create list of ARK properties, or create ARK properties collection is better. Properties collection. There you go here. And what I'm gonna do here is that I'm gonna create a random number. So count random count, get random number, like this. Let's implement that method first. Get random number. How do you do this? New int range, right? And then you start from minimum of 2, because it's a list, so it has to be a minimum of 2 and maximum of 10, like that, and then get value, right? Let's see, it doesn't like int range because I don't have the reference. Yeah, there you go. There you go. So I have a random count for a bunch of arcs. Okay, great. And then what else do I need? I need to basically say return, right? Enumerable, right? Range from 0 to count, select. So I'm selecting a dynamic object, right? And I'm basically saying, let's return a bunch of values, right? I want to return about a bunch of values here. So I'm going to go here and say, watch this, return new. Look, it's a dynamic object. It doesn't have a form or a meaning or anything like that. It's basically just a bunch of random things that I want to return, right? So there's an ID. We know that we need a GUID and a new GUID. That's fine. GUID, new GUID. That's fine. We need a date. So I need something to give me a random date time offset. So let's do that. Private static int get random. Oh, well, it's not an int. It's date time offset. Get random date. So that will be the ARK date basically. And I'm gonna go and say new, what is it? Date range, I think. Something like that. And then it has like an earliest date. So earliest date would be new date time. So earliest date, new date time. It could be epoch, it's up to you. And then get value. I think that should play well. And then we need a string, which is basically the act itself. So basically string get random string, that multi-worded string, mnemonic string, here you go, and then get value like that. And I think the mnemonic string will allow me to put a word count or something like that. There you go, get random number again. See, that's what this is for. And then I'm gonna go in here and basically say, well, get random date, that's your date time offset, and then the act, which is basically get random string. There you go, just like that. So this is supposed to return that. I just want to make sure, do I need to say .toList dynamic, something like that? Let's see. Why is this guy's complaining? It's saying, yeah, there you go. So this is item where I say random act properties like that. Yeah, that's better. So this guy just has the number, and we actually don't care about the number. We may as well just do this because it doesn't matter. This is me basically saying discard this value. It doesn't mean anything to me. Okay, so what I just did here is that I created a thing. You remember, things that are equal to the same thing are equal to each other. So out of that thing, I'm going to create the returned ARKs from the domain. But out of that thing also, I'm going to create the view model. So they're completely separate from each other. I'm just going to let the method, which is going to do the logic, kind of do that mapping and conversion for me. Okay. We have a question here. Ahmed Salim says, hello, hi Hassan, please, what do you think about .NET MAUI? Is it worth investing time and learning it with the recent layoff of the MAUI team? Yeah, I mean, the technology will still be there, right? So just because Microsoft laid off a bunch of people, it doesn't mean that the technology is just going to disappear, right? So don't ride that hype of like, oh, Microsoft let go of a bunch of people. That means that the technology itself is going to go away. That's not true at all. Companies lay off people all the time, right? So if Microsoft tomorrow lays off, like, let's say 100 people from Azure, let's just say hypothetically, does that mean that Azure is going to go away? Of course not, right? There are all these companies and all these contracts and all these systems are built on top of that technology, and Microsoft has a contract to commit to make sure to fulfill that contract. Like when you download the app and you install the system, there's an agreement, right? So don't ride that high. People are just making up things on the internet. Don't do that. Okay. And then I'll take one question, then we'll write the test. Then he says, how do you remember the syntax so well? Do it so many times. I've did this more than 1,000, more than 100,000 times, right? If you look at videos from like 5 years ago, you'll see me starting to do the exact same thing. This kind of Euclid law of axioms, I have talked about that for years and years and years. It doesn't matter, like, so just to understand, if you're not coding every day, you're going to get rusty and you're going to get slow. So you want to write code every day. You want to contribute every day. If there's nothing that you can code right now at work, go create an open source project and go create it. Just keep your hand warm, keep your hand busy, and keep thinking about building software. That's how you kind of remember things. Okay, let's write a test, people. So here's, I want to make sure that this is public and partial. So, the unit test doesn't kind of say I can't discover your dependencies. And then let's create the logic part of this. So here is ARK view services tests. I'm going to say dot logic dot retrieve all. So that's the name of the file. I'm going to clean up all of that junk. Let's throw away all of that stuff. We don't need it. Here you go. And let's start writing an actual unit test. Here's where it gets fun and interesting. There's fact, public, async, task, should retrieve all ARK views async. Very simple, easy test, right? We're going to give our test the 3 things: given, when, then. So that's how you basically kind of break down your syntax. You break down your method. And let's start with the assumptions, right? So this is a random ARK view collections, or random ARK view property collection. So this is where we say, give me that collection. Okay, great. So I created that collection. Now I want to create the expected, right? So this is ARK view, right? Let's first say this is expected ARK views. That's what I expect my method to give me back, right? When I'm kind of working with this, right? So I'm gonna go and say random ARK view collection, select, right? So this is ARK view properties, There you go. And I expect this guy to return a new ARK view. Here you go. Right, and inside that guy, it's freaking out because it's returning an IEnumerable. But if you do that to list, it'll be very happy. See, and then ID. What is the ID? ARK view. Just be careful. Autocomplete is not going to help you here because this is a dynamic object. It can be anything, right? So you're not going to find out until we run the test and discover. Oh no, there's no property is set up on this thing. So date, ARK view date, and then the last thing is the act, which is the string. Amazing, right? That's the expected ARK views. What else do I want to build here? I want to build something very similar, but it's the actual domain. So this is retrieved, right? So ARK, that's the domain model. Instead of the word views, I'm going to take this out. Control Shift, Alt, Control Shift. We'll select one word at a time. So Alt, Control Shift, and then arrows. You get to select one word at a time. See what I'm doing here? Super useful. And then I'm going to say ARK here, and then I'm not going to change anything else. So that's this will be your retrieved ARKs. These are the ones that we get from the mock, from the service mock. Okay. Is there anything else I need to do? I don't think so. Let's just go set up the mock. So this dot the mock, the ARK service setup service dot retrieve all ARKs async, and then returns asynchronously these retrieved ARKs. Okay, so now I can go and say, well, my expectations in an ARK view, actual ARK views, await this dot the view service, which is your ARK view service dot retrieve all of these, and then we just start kind of saying actual should be equivalent to expected. How easy is that, right? So that's the mock, verify, I wrote broker, service, and then service dot retrieve all whatever. You don't have to do the parentheses for once, and then you're gonna have to do the VNOs, which is verify no other calls, right? So this is mock, verify no other calls, logging broker, verify no other calls. There you go. So what did I do here? I just wrote a test. And what this test does, I create a random thing, and then I create my expected ARK views, my retrieved ARK views. When the ARK views are retrieved, just go ahead and map them, map these ARK views, and then just return ARK views. Super easy and simple. Control KE will clean up stuff for you. All these dependencies. Do you see these things up here? Control KE, make it just a habit. If you do it so much, it's like going to the gym, right? And then let's run the test. The expectation is that this test will obviously fail, but we want it to fail for the right reasons. We want it to say not implemented exception. There we go. By the way, some people told me, Hassan, your Visual Studio was struggling last time. What did you do? I honestly don't know. It just fixed itself. I updated everything on my machine, and I guess that fixed it. I'm not sure. But if you pull this project on your local machine and you do .NET workload restore, and it's working for you, then it was just a machine issue. Look at this error that I have here. Oh, you can't see it in the StreamYard, but if I click here, it's basically giving me the right error. What does it say? The method or the method or operation is not implemented, which is a good error, right? That error basically says, I went through your entire test, everything seems right, but the method that you're targeting is not implemented. It's not doing what you're expecting, which is what test-driven development means. You write the test, and then you write the implementation. Okay, let's do this. So I'm going to put in a failing test in here as a commit. The failing test as a commit is basically you saying literally in the history of your commit, this was truly test-driven, right? Because not every session like this is going to be recorded, but the person reviewing your code, they're going to go into your commit history and see, did you actually write a failing test? Did you actually make that test pass? Did you have to modify the test a little bit while you're making it pass? So you made a mistake in the history of committing. It's kind of a purist approach, right? Okay, let's make this test pass then. So we have this little guy here, and we want to do some mapping, right? So I want to go here and say map to test. There's this cool thing that you can do. Okay, let's do this. So let's first get the so list of ARKs. Let's put these in memory first. And then this is retrieved ARKs. And then await this dot service. So that's your ARK service, retrieve all ARKs async. Okay, we got our ARKs. And then I want to map these, right? So retrieved ARKs dot select. And that's your ARK, and you're basically returning a new ARK view like this. And in that ARK view, you're basically just kind of doing the mapping, really nothing special. Act, and I think the date comes before the act. There you go. Okay. Now, why is this guy complaining? Because this guy returns an IEnumerable, and I want to return a list, right? So I'm going to return a list like this. Here's a cool thing that you can actually do. You can select all this and make it kind of a func or an action, right? So extract method, map to ARK view. That's not exactly what I wanted it to do. I wanted it to kind of make this into an action because it makes it look much better, but extract local function. Extract a local function might actually, yeah, map to ARK view dot to list. It makes it look nicer this way, right? But I want to put this out as a method, right? So I'm going to put it here. Someone might say, Hassan, why are you putting it out as a method? Because you're going to need this later. You're going to need it for other things, right? Like as we're building this system, you're going to need it. So it makes sense to kind of reutilize. I'm going to explicitly say private, even though the default is private. If you make this into a property, you don't even need that open close parentheses, which I think looks even cooler. But that's just syntax and stuff like that. So I'm not too concerned about that. Okay, isn't that much cleaner? Like if you're doing one action, you don't have, like at this high level of the logic, you don't have to actually put the details of how this action happens, right? Don't be chatty in your final method. You want to kind of abstract away the details so people kind of look at your method and be like, oh, you retrieved a bunch of ARKs and then you converted them to an ARK view. Okay, makes sense. But if you put this inside your top view method, now people have to do extra work to understand what you're doing. Now let's just see what we just did. Does it work? Is it going to make the test pass? Let's find out. Here we go. Did it run? Did it fail? We might be missing a tiny detail. We'll find out. Okay, let's see what the error is. It basically says expected property ARK views date to be this, but it became that. What is this? Watch this. It basically said it's something else. It's showing me something else. I wonder what that is, why that is. It basically says, well, I generated a random date for you, but this random date is changing for whatever reason. We need to find out how to solve that problem, right? So let's go back to our actual date time range here. And we basically said with every one of these, we want to get a random date, and then we return the dynamic list of random as random date, right? And in the implementation here, I basically returned that collection and I basically said it's literally date for date, right? This is a date for date. Maybe, I don't know, could be wrong. Maybe it interpreted the date as a date time instead of a date time offset. It's possible. Let's try this. Let's give this guy like a date time offset conversion. Maybe, we'll see. Let's run this again and see if that works. Let's go. Let's see here. Yeah, it's not happy for some reason about the date, and it's basically saying I'm comparing them one to one. And what I'm oh, look at this. The dates here are all recent. Look at this. All the dates here are recent. 2025, 0517, which is like today, like right now, right? Let's see why it thinks that. Like why it thinks that dates have to be. It must be something in our implementation that makes it kind of look at the date as a recent date instead of the earliest date. This could be a bug somewhere that we need to kind of figure out together. Let's find out. Oh, look at that. Date time now. Do you know why it ended up being date time now? Because I'm using AI. AI is basically auto-completing and I'm trusting it so much. I shouldn't trust AI so much, right? So that should be date. And then just that, I swear to you, I didn't stage this. This is really exactly what just happened. This is a real life thing. You go and you just click like this. Like, look, what I basically did was like, oh, I'm streaming and I'm talking. Let AI help me out, right? And I just do like this and it basically does autocomplete for me. But then it's gonna lead you astray. But thank God for unit tests. Unit tests will tell you exactly that you're going crazy. If I didn't have unit tests right now, I'd be a whole lot confused once the application is actually deployed in production. Okay, so we did the right thing. Unit test did exactly what it should. It found out a problem in my code. Now hopefully it'll pass. There you go. That's a pass. That's a good score right there. Okay, great. Let's do this. And let's say pass. Perfect. Now we have to handle a couple of exceptions. We'll do that super quick, but let's take a quick question from Christian. Christian says, "Hello, is this behavior-driven test?" Yeah, this is behavior because I'm not passing specific. BDD is basically like I'm not passing specific values, right? I'm really passing random values, right? And these random values are testing actually the behavior, right? Instead of the actual specific values that come through, or at least that's how I represent behavior driven development, is that I'm testing the behavior of the method. I'm not sending specific IDs and specific values. And that's basically my interpretation of BDD. So yes, is it BDD? Yes, I think it's BDD. That's at least that's how we're handling it. But the world is not just kind of bunnies and rainbows out there. You can't just go and say, well, I implemented the method and I wrote one test and everything is good and dandy. I shouldn't do anything any further. That's not right. Because in reality, what if this guy fails? Or what if this guy fails, right? What if you have a null coming through, like a null object coming through your system, and you actually don't know how to handle it? You need to kind of handle some exceptions. Lucky for us, we mapped external exceptions in the previous session. We basically mapped everything into either a critical dependency or a dependency exception and a service exception. So we're just going to carry that forward. So just like how we mapped domain models, we're going to do the exact same thing in here. So let's just create a folder in here, a new folder in here called exceptions, right? And under exceptions, I'm going to create something called failed ARK view dependency exception. And I'm going to create ARK view dependency exception like this, ARK view dependency exception. Okay, two exceptions. Let's start with the failed ARK view dependency exception. This is the exception with the X. This guy is not expected to deal with domain models, unlike what we did with the other system. So this is a message. And then I'm going to go here and say exception, inner exception. So in here, I'm not tolerating that I have a dependency that will send me a raw system exception. This is different, right? And then in here, I'm just going to say base. There you go. And then I'm just going to clean up my code a little bit. Control KD, Control KE. Great. So that's a failed ARK view dependency. Something downstream didn't kind of pan out well, and I need to work out this problem. Okay. And then what about the ARK view dependency exception? Let's go and do this. The exact same thing. ctor string message. And this is E exception with the X inner exception. And here's base. There you go. Okay, now we need to write a test that say, when your downstream services are experiencing a problem, we need to make sure that this problem is handled. That's the second unit test we need to write. Let's create a new file here first. And let's call this file the exceptions for the retrieval. Look at the bottom right in here, exceptions. Here we go. And I'm going to write a new test in here. So I'm going to take away all that stuff. And I'm going to go and say should throw dependency exception, right, on retrieve, well, on retrieve all if dependency error occurred and log it async. So that's the method name. Super long, but I promise you it's less than 120 characters, only 110. So I guess that's fine. Let's do that. Given when then. Let's go and create. So var inner exception. It doesn't matter actually what that inner exception is. We're going to wrap it anyway. So this is inner exception like that. And then I'm going to go here and say var failed ARK view dependency exception. So new failed ARK view dependency exception. And the message here is failed ARK view dependency error occurred, contact support. Of course, you can change this message to whatever you want actually, if you want to, because this view model is what's actually going to show up on the screen. That's what your component is going to be rendering. We're going to talk about that when we get into components, but for the time being, your inner exception is your inner exception. Can I just leave it like this? Yeah, I can, but it looks kind of weird. Can I do that? Yeah, either or. I think both are fine. And then expected ARK view dependency exception, new ARK view dependency exception like that. And then this guy also will take a message, ARK view dependency error occurred, contact support, like that. And then inner exception is your failed ARK view. So that's basically our actual and expected. And then we're just going to pretend that an error occurred, like a dependency error occurred. It doesn't matter what the dependency error may be, right? I need to create it though. So var, what is it? ARK dependency exception. That's the exception that we're trying to kind of handle, right? ARK dependency exception, and then it has an inner exception. It probably has a message, but we don't really care about the message. Fine, let's do that. Message. This is why I create like the model that already has built-in message in it. So I don't have to do that twice, but sure, you know, some message. This is me basically saying I don't care. This also should say some inner exceptions because like the type of that exception doesn't matter. I'm putting it here just for the purpose of knowing that this has happened. Okay, so we're gonna unwrap, localize, and then wrap again, and then throw the exception. Let's make the mock do that little trick for us. So this is ARK view mock setup service dot retrieve all ARKs async, but this time it's throws async. Throws what async? It throws the ARK dependency exception, which is the exception that we're trying to handle here. Okay. Okay, let's do this. So ARK view dependency exception is my expected ARK view dependency exception. That's what I'm going to compare to later. I want to go and say this is a value task of a list of ARK views. I'm going to kind of contain the task itself that I'm working with. So this is retrieve all ARK views task. This, that, sir, don't await this one. You don't want to await this one because this one is not supposed to execute, not just yet. Okay, and then await assert throws async, right? And then what do we put in there? The retrieve ARK view task as task, like that. But in that throws async, I want to also say it should throw a type or an exception of type ARK view dependency, like that. What is the argument? Is it test code? Sure, let's do that. Cool. So this ARK view dependency exception, this should be actual, not expected. Actual ARK view dependency exception, like that. And then I'm going to do the comparison. So actual ARK view dependency should be equivalent to expected ARK view dependency, just like that. So this is an exception that will be thrown, and we're going to unwrap it. So we're going to take the inners of it, right? And then we're going to basically wrap it again in our category. I'll explain in a second why that's important, but if you have a service or a downstream dependency that has many different exceptions or localized exceptions, it helps that you're categorizing and handling that as one flow. You're basically aggregating these exceptions and basically handling them as one flow if you don't care about taking a specific action based on that exception that you're throwing. Okay, what else we want to verify? I want to verify that I logged this error. It's not a critical error, but at the same time, I want to verify that I actually made the call, right? So the first call that we made, the chronological order here is super important. So the ARK service.verify, this is your ARK service. So this is service.retrieve all ARKs, should be called times once. Great. That's one part. But also because an issue has happened, we want to verify that our broker log error has had, it is, right, same exception as, right, because it doesn't understand, it cares a lot about references, and I don't want it to care about references. It should kind of log the same exception as the expected exception, which is this little guy right there. Here you go. Where do I get that same exception as from? We wrote that once before, that little guy right here. Let's throw it right here because we can reuse it. There you go. Now, someone might say, Hassan, why don't you build a commons file or a commons library or utilities library that has all these similar methods? That's the beginning of the end of any software, right? So instead of me just copying that method over and being able to maintain it within its own context, now I'm building this kind of dumpster fire hellhole of a DLL that everyone is going to be pulling down, and it's going to have a lot of conflicts. It doesn't work with the new version. You know, sometimes like DRY, don't repeat yourself, is not always the best practice to follow. Because if you try to be too smart with the code and try to kind of containerize it and minimize it, eventually you're going to want to do that one change. And now you need to have overloads of your methods. You need to have modifications to your method. You need to upgrade the version of your method. It's a complete headache when you're building massive systems. So yes, repeat yourself. Keep your code really extremely dumb. Writing dumb code in complex systems is definitely the right thing or the smart thing to do. So please do that. Verifying no other calls, and then also the logging broker verify no other calls. So this is me basically saying I handled the dependency exceptions that are coming from the lower stream service. Lower stream service, dependency, right there, no problem. Control KE, here we go. Cleaning up stuff, and then this guy should basically, the sign that this test has done what it should be doing is when it throws the exception and the exception says, I expected you to handle that exception, but the native dependency exception is the one that propagated through the system. Okay. So let's see if that guy fails. It's loading. Sticking a monate. Almost up. There you go. So look at the exception that came through. It basically says, look at this. It says, I expected you to give me an ARK view dependency exception, but what I actually got from you is ARK dependency exception. That means that the lower dependency exception propagated through the system and it just bubbled through, and you didn't actually handle it the way you're supposed to, right? So that's a good failing test. That's a good message, right? Failure is good. Failing tests as expected is good. So here's a commit. And now let's go and make sure that this guy actually handles that. So we have an ARK view service in here. We want to make sure our service is partialized because we're about to make it much smarter by making it handle exceptions that will be thrown. So I'm going to copy that service, and then I'm gonna paste it right here. right? And then I'm gonna say ARK view service dot exceptions. I think I made a very, very little tiny mistake. I put the models where the services are. They should have been with where the views are, the models. Let me move that and see if Visual Studio will be nice. So if I move this guy all the way under ARK views in here, may take time. Do you want to update namespace? Ooh, look at that. That's magic. Did it actually do that? Yeah, it's perfect. I love that. Perfect. Thank you, Said Hashimi. This is a great feature. I love it. Thank you, Visual Studio team. Okay, let's do that. I don't need the reference to the interface here anymore, so I don't need to do that. Control KE will clean up your service, but what I really want is a private delegate value task list of ARK views returning, here you go, returning ARK views function. And then I'm going to start implementing a try catch in here. So let's do this. Private async value task list of ARK views try catch. There you go. This is a wrapper that's going to handle our try catch away from the noise, right? Here's our function. Let's break that down a little bit for people who are watching. And then really just a simple try catch. I'm going to await whatever that returning ARK view function is doing. But the exception that I'm trying to handle here, it's called ARK dependency exception. If I copy like this and I go here and do ARK exception, that works. So that's the exception that's coming out of that dependency that I'm calling. Did I copy that code in the wrong place? Yeah, I did. let me fix that. Let me take this guy and let me put it down here. This was supposed to be down here. And then let me take my methods that are up here and move them up to the root file right here. Everything has a solution, right? You're just gonna have to be persistent enough, right? Okay, so let's localize. So this is failed ARK view dependency exception. New failed ARK view dependency exception. It has a message in here. Failed ARK view dependency error occurred. Contact support. There you go. And then the other thing is the inner exception, which is basically the inner of this guy, arc dependency.inner. That's the one we care about. The other one is fine. And I think we need to do some mapping to it because it doesn't know that it's actually an exception because it's an implementation of the generic exception. And then in here, create and log arc view dependency exception. I'm going to create this method right here. I'm going to pass this exception right here. And then let's go and create that method. This method is supposed to return arc view dependency exception. Create and log arc view dependency exception, just like that. And then this guy can be generic. So this is an inner exception. Here you go. And then I'm going to kind of categorize that exception. So I'm going to go here and say arc view dependency exception, like this, new arc view dependency exception, which has a message. Arc view dependency error. Don't worry, the unit test will catch anything you're making wrong. That's why we have unit tests. It's very important. And then here's your inner exception, and that's the inner exception. And then we need to log that guy. So this dot logging broker, actually it's awaitable, right? So await this dot logging broker log error, and that's the arc view dependency exception. And then I'm gonna want to return what? Return the arc view dependency exception right here. Okay, maybe that guy should be async as well since we did it that way. And then that guy should be a value task like this, right? And this guy should be awaitable. There you go. So what did I do here? I created a try catch container. It will take our function, right? And it will catch an arc dependency exception and do all that jazz that I just did with that test. Now, how do I use it? All I really have to do is just go back to my ARK view service and just drop it right there. Look at this. Try catch, async, open up the view. There you go. and then take away that async from there. And now you're handling that exception. See, I didn't kind of pollute the view for you, right? I didn't pollute the view with issues that are an exception. Like if I put all the exception handling in here, now you're scared of the code. You look at the code and you're like, that's too much to process. I really don't like this. It's kind of consuming all my cognitive resources, right? There's a little bit of art that was intent to be into this. This art makes sure that when you're reading the code, if you don't care about the exceptions are going to happen, then don't. Just look at what the function is actually doing without having to work with this problem. Now, does this make the test pass? Let's see. We're one test away from wrapping up one other block in our architecture. Oh, we have an error. Let's see what the problem is. It's probably the it's probably the exceptions. Let's take that guy out. Oh, it's just because I moved the exceptions over. Yeah, that's fine. Okay, let's run this. Here we go. Almost there. Passing, passing, or failing, failing. We'll find out. I must, look, it says failed ARK dependency, error occurred, contact support. It says that even your exception message has a problem, like you forgot something. Let's see, failed ARK view dependency error. And what is dependency error occurred, contact support? I forgot a period. See, one little dot in the message could cause your unit test to fail, which means that you have a solid system that actually will catch anything that's not done right. Let's do this. Needless to say, of course, thanks to Christo and the standard community for building such awesome tools. Okay, there's still another problem. It says failed ARK view dependency error occurred, contact support, but found failed ARK view dependency error occurred, contact support. What's error? Maybe a spelling of something. Error occurred. I usually make a problem with the spelling, contact support. And also the other word that I always get it wrong is the word dependency. Failed ARK dependency. Failed. Oh, there's an E in here. There's a missing E. Failed, right? So this is failed like that. Okay, cool. Great catch. This is a great example. Actually, I promise you, I swear this is not staged. This is just real life development. And there you go. This is the test. The failing test has passed. We are clear to go. Really, unit tests kind of make sure that it shows you what you're not paying attention. It makes you think about the same problem or write the same code, technically write the same code twice. So you can be a monitor of you to make sure you're not making a mistake. Because it's very unlikely that the developer will have an oversight over the same thing twice in the same session. It's very, very hard. It's very unlikely, but it could happen. Dinesh says, we have a question from Dinesh. It says, Hassan, divide 8 hours of a day weekends. How would you spend your weekend when you were at the start of your career? Pretty much what I'm doing right now is just without a live stream. I would just start new projects. You work with new projects, right? You come up with ideas. That, the code part is easy, but coming up with an idea and then making that idea come to life, that's what's going to teach you programming, right? If you keep writing hello world programs, you're not actually going to learn programming, right? You're going to learn programming and software engineering if you come up with ideas and try to actually make these ideas come into reality. You're going to run into all kinds of crazy stuff that will make you want to learn how to do certain things. How do I talk to an API? How do I design a mobile app? How do I build a website? All of these things. So, okay, you can build a website, but what are you going to make this website do? Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? All that kind of stuff. I think at the beginning of your career, you should spend a lot of time trying to kind of hone your skill, really, just really invest into being good at what you do, right? Okay, there's one more exception that we need to handle, and then we can close that story. We can close that little service kind of thing. It's something very similar. So under exception views, I'm going to create a new exception, but this time it's going to be called failed Failed ARK view service exception. So that's one. So this is what happens. Memory leakage, something is going on in your service that is not handled by the lower stream dependency, and you need to take care of it, right? So this is a string of a message, and then this is an exception with the E, because this is a service exception. This is not something, this is native local to the system, right? And then basically base message inner exception, yada yada, exact same, no problem, control KE, fantastic. And then I need the wrapper to this, so it'll be ARK view service exception. There you go. I'm gonna do exception. I'm gonna do a CTOR. I'm gonna go and say, well, this is a service exception. So actually, before I do that, I made a little mistake. I need to handle two kinds of exceptions. Wait a second. So this is not completed yet, because what I really want to do, like that, your lower stream service is not going to just throw an ARK dependency exception. It's also going to throw an ARK service exception. And I want to handle all of these. How do you do that? Well, it's very easy. You can go here and say private, watch this, public static theory, public static, what was it called? We want to basically handle a bunch of exceptions. It's called theory collect theory data. There you go. And then it takes this, and then ARK dependency, because there's a bunch of these, right? And I want to handle all of them. So var some inner exception, new exception, like that. And then I want to return a theory data of exception. I want to handle all the inner exceptions are coming from that guy. So I'm gonna change my test and make it fail, and then we're gonna make things work. So this will be a new ARK dependency exception. Here you go, with that some inner exception, great. And then a new ARK service exception with some inner exception as well. I guess we need a message in here. So message, whatever the message may be. So this is some message in here. And then the same thing basically in here, message, because we really ignore that message at this level, so it doesn't matter, some message like that. Maybe it makes more sense if I go and say string, some message, and then basically say get random string. That's probably prettier, right? So here, some message, some message. Okay, how do I make my test run against all these inputs, all of these input parameters? If I go back here, I'm just gonna change fact to theory, right? And then I'm gonna go and say, what's it called? The data member, right? And then I'm gonna pass in here ARK dependency exceptions, like that guy. But the only thing left in here is, I think it's name of ARK dependency. Yeah, name of. It works really weird, but that's basically me saying pass a whole bunch of exceptions to this guy. And here's my inner exception. So that basically means I can remove literally all of that code in here, right? And I go here and I can say inner exception dot inner exception, which is basically whatever is coming from that exception. There you go. And then there's one more thing I'm missing. Let's see what it is. Data member does not constructor that takes 2 argument. Is it member data? Yeah, there you go. Member data, not data member. That's right. And then the exception that I'm throwing is that inner. Let's call it something else. Call it ARK dependency exception, like that. There you go. Much better. So now this test will fail again, because I'm basically saying you need to handle 2 different kinds of exceptions, actually, not just the one. So let's see here. There, fantastic. It's failing as it should. Yeah, there you go. It says you handled one. You guys can see it here, but look, it basically created 2 tests. One for one parameter. Look at this. Look at the view here. So one passed and one failed. The one that passed that we already handled, but there's another dependency exception that we had to actually care about. right? So when you're thinking through and you're writing tests, it'll kind of help you. So let's go back and kind of mark this test as fail again, because I upgraded that test. So that's a fail, and I'm only going to commit the things I care about, which is this guy, staging, this guy. Okay, and then we're going to make that guy pass again. It's very easy to make it pass. All I have to do is just kind of replicate this piece, and instead of ARK dependency exception, I'm just going to call it ARK service exception, just like that. And if I do Control Alt Shift service like this and do control period, it will rename everything for me. Okay, now if I run that test, it will run just fine. It will run like amazing. It just works like a charm. Watch it. There we go. Great. We have a passing test. Fantastic. Okay, now let's go back to to the piece that I was talking about. So, okay, let me stage this. Let's stage this too. Yep, that's the passing piece. Okay. Let's go back to the services, right? So this is failed ARK view service exception. ARK view service exception, this guy here. So it'll take a message and an exception. That's your inner exception. Oops. Inner exception. Like this. And then in the base, it's doing the exact same thing. No problem. Control KE. There you go. ARK service, ARK view service exception. And that's a different one because that's basically saying, hey, you know, something actually went wrong with the service itself that was not happening in downstream services. And it's not a validation or a dependency exception. It's that generic something in general happened that caused this to operate this way, right? So what can I do here? I can copy this guy. I can steal this guy right here, and I can turn it into a simple test. I can take this out. I can take the parameters because there's only one. I don't have to test against multiple, and then change the word dependency to service, just like that. So service like that. I need to create some service exception. So here's a service, no exception, just the generic one that makes your service even more resilient. So you're handling all the issues. And then basically, if I go and find everywhere where it says dependency and just change that to service, I think that'll do the trick for me. Look, I'm changing all of them at once. ARK service exception. Isn't that cool? And then this guy, I can throw that here. This would be the inner itself, so I don't need to do that. Some service. I need to call it some service exception though. Exception like that. And then I need to find the lowercase ones. Is there any other lowercase ones? There, service, ARK view service exception like that. So what is this doing? It's basically creating the failed ARK view service, expected ARK view service, runs the code, and then verifies, and then logs the error. Easy peasy. Right? Isn't programming super fun? You just can do a lot of things super fast. Let's do this. At least in this day and age, it's super fun. It's way too much fun. Okay, and this guy failed, and it's basically saying I failed for this reason, that I'm supposed to have a service, an ARK view service exception, but it actually threw just a generic exception. Great. That's the exact failing test that I expect. There you go. And now we need to handle it. And handling it will be, again, very similar to what we did here. I'm going to steal this guy. I'm going to do this. I'm going to change everywhere where it says dependency into a service like this. And then the only thing that's left for me to do is to basically just make sure that the actual language ARK view service error occurred like this. And then the same thing here as well. I'm going to go and copy that last guy and say a generic exception has happened in the service. So here's an exception. And then we need to update that guy over here. And then we need to change the word dependency here. So dependency, this will be service, and just like that. That should do the trick. I think I took too much. I took too much here, so let's do that. There you go. Easy peasy. Does this make the test pass though? Let's find out. Control KE. Here's your view service. Let's run all of that. We're just about to start the mobile Maui part, so get excited. Super exciting. Okay, that's passing, so that's done. That's it. That wraps up that service. A very simple view service. If you do Control MO, it will collapse all the methods on Visual Studio, and then you can say this is a pass. And then the last thing, always don't forget to do this. Always don't forget to do this. Kind of makes engineers spin in circles, and then they figure out, oh, I forgot to register my service. This is at transient ARK view service. ARK view service. Always remember to register your services. Otherwise, the dependency injection won't work. It'll be like, I don't understand what we are doing here. Configs, register, ARK view service. I don't know if Greg already created an issue for this, but we're gonna find out really soon. Okay, so it's all said and done. Let's create a pull request. Views, retrieve all ARK views, and this guy closes ARK views. No, I don't think there's one in there. Okay, that's fine. Let's create a pull request. We'll go solo. We'll make it work. Here you go. Let's jump to the pull request right here. Here you go. It's always nice to review your own code, but let's just see if we have an issue. Yeah, we don't have an issue here. So views, retrieve all ARK views. There you go. Create. And then I'm gonna kind of make it close that issue. So closes, right, views, retrieve all ARK views. And then just take a quick look at your code while it's building. Like, does it make sense? You know, do you see anything that's not clean? Like, before asking the seniors on your team to kind of look into your code, you just basically want to do your own kind of quick review. Be kind of your own kind of reviewer. Git has this cool feature that basically says, okay, I reviewed this file. I already reviewed it. It's just a little checkbox at the top that I think is very useful. Here we go. Here we go. We did the mapping. We did everything. Now, watch this. If you look at the commit history, which is really important, you're going to see that kind of progression, the natural progression of things. This is truly test driven, right? Because I'm saying here's an assumption fail, assumption pass, assumption fail, assumption pass, assumption fail, pass, fail, pass, and then I register. This is a clean, super clean pull request. If I go into the fail and I look at the files, I will see only the files that I care about, which is the failing test and a couple of models. That's a purely clean pull request. That's how a pull request should be. Okay. Oh, look, I found an issue in my own code. Extra line right here. Well, that's a good thing. That's why it's always important to kind of review your own code. And then when you review a lot of code, your eye kind of builds up this kind of muscle, right? You build this muscle that basically tells you, yeah, you know, this is, you know, you see something out of the ordinary or something unusual, you need to probably figure it out and fix it, right? So that's what file is this? That's the exceptions, the test, the exceptions retrieval. Let's go and fix that part. Yeah, see, there's an extra line right here. We don't need that extra line, right? So one line, a separator between methods is enough. What do you call that? A code rub, code cleanup, remove extra line. It doesn't change a functionality. It's just code rub. You know, when you do a rubbing of glass, that's what this is. Okay, so I addressed my own comment. Let's go back and review this again. There you go. If you basically say here, show all changes, this kind of tripped me for a while because I would be looking at, see that says extra line, but you know, I'll kind of let, even if you're working with a team and you leave comment on your own code, you should probably say done to yourself. because that tells everyone else on the team, yeah, I took a look at the code and it looks fine. Okay, that looks good to me, and it did build on my local machine. So I'm gonna merge it just for the interest of time for everyone. But usually you have to wait until your pull requests actually merge. Okay, so now what's the next step? Now let's go back to our architecture and let me show you this kind of crystal maze show that we have. Let me show you where we are. We did some great progress. Watch this. All of this now is green because we just completed the service. We don't need that anymore, right? So we completed the service. So now we move on to actually building the mobile app, right? The actual UI components, which I think a lot of people have been waiting for, since the beginning of this session. So they waited an hour and a half, but hopefully you guys are also kind of benefiting from the actual services that I'm building here and learning from that experience. Okay, here comes the fun part, right? You want to build a component. So let's just kind of give you a view of what we're trying to implement here. I'm going to use a service called Sync Fusion. Sync Fusion, instead of you going and trying to implement your own UI, they've already done that for you. They've already done the research and developing Blazor, Maui UI components that you actually can use. So let me kind of show you Sync Fusion first. Just so everyone is aware, I am in no way, shape, or form associated with Sync Fusion. This is literally a component that I like, right? And I want to see literally, like, I want to introduce you to something that worked for me, right? This is not a referral or anything of that kind, okay? Let's go look at the carousel. So that's syncfusion.com. Look at the carousel. That looks exactly what we're trying to implement. So we're basically going to have the random acts of kindness, and then people can basically on their phone, they can actually navigate through different random acts of kindness. See, it's a carousel, right? So you kind of click right and left, right? Maybe instead of a bird, we can basically put it, we can basically put just some raw HTML, honestly. Sound check for people that are still on the stream. Let me know if you still can hear me. I think my headset just went offline all of a sudden. So that's the carousel, right? That's basically what we want to put in our mobile app. It kind of helps if you see it in action, right? Like if we look at like kind of a POC, right? Thank you, Intense Scene. Thank you, everyone. Perfect, perfect. Okay. It kind of helps to kind of POC this. So before you start building kind of native components and all that kind of stuff, and base components and all that, let's try it. Let's see if we can actually run a carousel. They give you like kind of a picture in here, and it says slide content, slide 5, whatever, whatever. Can I actually get it to run on my app? So here's what I'm gonna do. This is very helpful. Please try and do this, when you build mobile apps, because this is how I do it myself, and it worked perfectly well for me. So here's that view. I'm gonna go to the main branch first to get a clean, fresh branch. Okay, so all good and dandy. I'm gonna do a quick rebuild just to make sure everything is fine. Okay, when you get latest from main, don't trust anything. Just try to run it locally, even though it takes a little bit of time with mobile apps, but just bear with me on this upcoming piece. This is the most important part of this session. We need to make sure that the carousel works at all before we start building base components and mocking these components and all that fun stuff we want to do. I just want to make sure it works first. So let's do this. Okay, build succeeded, great. I'm gonna go and create a new branch. I'm gonna call it users Hassan Habib slash POCs, right? And then carousel. So I'm doing a carousel in its own branch, like completely far away from your production environment. You want to create one in your own branch. And then basically, let's bring in that Sync Fusion stuff. Let's go here and let's type in Sync Fusion, Blazor, themes. I want to install the theme. Sure. You have to kind of jump like this so it starts so it starts building. Here you go. So I'm installing Here we go. Okay. Sorry, everyone. Just a little technical issue here. Let's go back. What was I doing? Installing Sync Fusion. Okay, so installed. And then let's also install Sync Fusion navigation, which is the carousel thing, right? That's the carousel thing that I'm trying to implement. So here you go, carousel. Fine. Let's jump. Here you go. Okay. And then it says the process can't access whatever. Something made it angry because it's being used by another process. Okay, it's gone. It's gone. It's just weird. It's doing weird stuff. Okay. How do I install Sync Fusion to my app? Well, step number one, watch this. I'm gonna go and say Maui app builder.services.add sync fusion blazor. First thing. Okay, so I just said add sync fusion blazor. That's all I had to do. The other thing you want to do is that you want to basically make sure that you have the themes, like the actual JavaScript that comes with these libraries and whatnot. Where do you add that? You can add it in your main view. Let me find that for you. The main page, not main page. It's under root index right here. That root index at the top, because you're basically standing up a web server inside of a mobile app, and you're running a web component. You're running web components on your Maui Blazor app, right? So what do I need to add here? I'll show you. If you go to Sync Fusion, actually, their documentation is wild. It's very, very good. If you look at the documentation, so I'm going to go into the carousel component, hang tight, carousel. It'll show you some live view, but there's also the documentation. So let me just kind of take you to the demos. And then I'm going to take you to, at the bottom here, there's documentation section. And every single one of their documentation section will give you a walkthrough. It'll give you a walkthrough of this. Literally from the moment you need to install it. See, I install themes and navigations. I should have probably started there. I should have started showing you this particular piece, right? But also there's a lot of JavaScript piece that you need to add. This CSS and JavaScript piece, we need to add that in there in order for the thing to work, right? So I'm going to add these two pieces in here. Look, it says add sync fusion components. This is pretty much what I did with the application itself, but let's just go and start from there. So let me go back here and let me add this piece in here. So this is your Sync Fusion style sheets. Someone might say, where is this content coming from? This is the DLL that you pulled down. The DLL that you pulled down is what is doing that for you, right? So this DLL is not just code. It can have files in it, and these files can be extracted and accessed, right? So that's basically the trick there. Okay, so what's the question here? Alexandru is basically saying no app shell. Well, I'm not using the app shell. Just for everyone to understand, an app shell is like the main navigation container in your .NET MAUI, but this is .NET MAUI hybrid. So I'm using the kind of web view to work with, right? But you could probably use it like you're basically hosting your main page. Like the app shell is what hosts the main page, which is the Blazor web view inside of it, right? You could use that, but that's not what we're trying to use here, right? Yeah, this is a Blazor hybrid app, exactly like Ahmed says. This is a Blazor hybrid app. Okay, because this is a test, because just a POC, what I'm gonna do is that I'm gonna try to show you in here that this carousel actually works, right? So what was the page that we had? We had the home page, right? And we had an example, a Blazor example for that kind of carousel thing going on. So let me kind of pull it as is. Like I'm gonna literally pull that code and slam it down here just to make sure that things actually work here. This is the whole thing with the styles, with everything. The only thing left is that for me to kind of call the navigations in here. And now everything else should work. So that carousel right here, that's basically what's going to render on the screen. So let's see if that's true. I'm going to run it in, let's run it on the Pixel 6 Pro emulator. Let's see if that works. It's actually, it already popped, like the emulator already popped on the screen for me, but I can't share that with you because of how large the screen size is, but it's gonna show you in Visual Studio as well, which is a huge favor that the Visual Studio team have done for streamers and people who are trying to share knowledge. Okay, here we go. It's building and thinking and doing a lot of things. It's also good that we're doing that POC to kind of see that everything we built so far is kind of wired up proper, even though we're not using it necessarily yet. You know, the app itself would kind of barf if the registrations are incorrect or whatever the case may be. Okay, here we go. Doing a lot of things. I'm not gonna lie to you. I have no idea half of whatever it's doing right now, but what I know is that it's just gonna pop up a window and show you like the web view. Like if you ask me, Hassan, what is some of that create application shared libraries, or I know about the signed things, but other than that, I don't. Okay, so here we go. We have a .NET. Look at that. It loaded the carousel. Do you see it? It's pretty cool. And that's how literally we're gonna think about and implement the acts of random kindness. Of course, we're gonna make it look so much better, right? But for the time being, this basically proves to me that if I start building base components and put these base components in my test and start implementing these base component, that's exactly what's going to look on the screen. Of course, we want it to be a little bit taller. We want it to fit the screen. We're not necessarily going to have we might add pictures to it. We might do anything in it. And just so you understand, like this, you can literally test this in real time on both your iOS and Android view apps. Like if you're not sure that things are working the way you expect them to, you can literally just hardwire, put the USB in your app, and it will literally start the application on your local view, which is super powerful. Now, someone might ask, well, Hassan, where are we going to do this figure and all that kind of stuff? That's what this act string is going to be. Like, ideally, this arc, it will be like arc view dot act, right? And that'll render the thing for you, right? That will render the view for you. Okay, so that's the serious stuff. That's the stuff that we really want to implement, the stuff that we care about. So let's do this. I also want you to understand something. Like, you're gonna see a lot of um, CSS in here. I don't want you to worry about that CSS yet, because what we're gonna do is that we're gonna copy that CSS and we're gonna write it in C#. So we have this library called Sharp Styles that will allow you to write C# code, test drive that C# code, and be sure that this C# code will render as CSS. So I'm about to show you some crazy magic right now. But it's important also for me, like for you to understand that you're not going to actually, and we're going to do this experiment super quick together. You can't just use third-party components directly in your application like that. Like your components can't have third-party components in it like that. You want to abstract these guys away, right? You want to put these guys behind base components. So remember, just going back to our architecture here real quick, if you go to this architecture, remember I said there's a carousel base component right here, this guy in red, right? And then your ARK component will be using that. So that guy in green is supposed to talk to this guy in red, but we're not done with any of them yet, and we don't have a blocker. Like right now, we're just trying to build this particular piece. Okay, but how do you build that? This looks like a nested scenario, right? You have a nested situation where you have a component and a nested component within it. Let me show you just, again, in terms of POC, just for the purpose of POCs, what you want to do is that under components, there's pages and layouts. I'm going to add this new thing called bases. This is still a POC. This is just for you to kind of see what I'm going to do. I'm adding bases in here. And then I'm going to create something called a razor component called carousel carousel base. So you have to kind of, just like you say storage broker, just like you say I don't know, logging broker, the equivalent of a broker in the UI world is when we say the word base component. Okay. And I want, like for starters, I want to start replacing this third-party components, right, with the base component. So I'm going to go back to my page here in the home page, and I want to replace this guy specifically. Okay, so how do I do it? Well, this guy can be referenced here. Absolutely no problem. SF carousel, like that. And I forgot to kind of close. Here you go. Okay, so I'm replacing that. But inside this guy, I need to put child content, because this guy's going to have other things inside of it. So that means you need a backend C# code for that front end code. So I called it carousel base dot razor.cs. So this is the backend. See how it's nesting right behind that razor component. So that's the backend of the front end, the backend of your component that controls this, right? Now, why is this guy complaining? Because this guy needs to be partial, because it's part of this other class. This is technically a class, a C# class, and this is another class. Okay. And what you want to do here is that you want to pass in a render fragment. That render fragment is basically saying allow things to go inside of this guy. Allow other things to go right inside this guy. How do we do it? Watch this. Property, render, fragment, and then I'm going to call it child content. I think it's called child content. I don't know, child component, maybe. We'll see. Right? And then do I pass a parameter in here? I think maybe. Something like that. We will find out if that actually works or not. What we're going to do is that we're going to go to that home page and replace SF carousel with carousel base. This guy right here. Did it change the bottom as well? Yeah, perfect. So that's the first thing. The first step of abstraction is that I'm basically replacing third party with an abstraction layer. Of course, you can take away like all that and you can do control period. But again, you're still in the POC phase. You're seeing if things would work, right? We're seeing if things would work. So instead of third party, you're doing your own abstract component. Now let's see if that works. Let's run this guy and see if that works. Let's go up in here. It's going to take a second, and I apologize for everyone about the view, but here we are. Here we go. Give it a second there. I should probably run the Windows. The Windows view is much better because the Windows view is much faster. It can render much faster. Let me just wait for this one to finish, and then we're gonna run on the Windows. The Windows is basically a Windows app because it's a Blazor hybrid, so it can MAUI hybrid, so it can basically run it as a Windows app, a desktop app, a web app, a mobile app. It doesn't matter. All this code will just render and work, which is beautiful. Does it work? Here we go. I don't actually know if it already rendered or not, but we could verify. I could basically put like a label down here and say hi, right? And then just do a hot reload, see if it works. Yeah, there it is. There's the label. So it actually worked, right? Because it actually rendered that view for me. It might not have the exact same, navigation right and left. Maybe it's larger than it is, right? I'm not sure. But remember, you can always switch back to Windows machine, and that's so much faster. The Windows machine will spin up in the full-blown view, so we can see the whole thing. But that's the first point of abstraction. Just hang in there because I'm going to do another point of abstraction for you real quick. Here's the Windows view, right? The whole blown carousel. I replaced it with a base component, and then I'm going to show you why that base component is super important. Okay, so that's carousel base. I need to create another one just for the purpose of POC. So carousel child carousel item base. So that's another one, right? And what goes inside that one, that's basically the act, the content that you're going to render in there as a fragment, as whatever you want it to be, right? So how do we do that? The exact same thing. You have the SF, what did we call it? We called it a carousel item. Yeah, there it is. Let's go back into that guy and say carousel item. It might throw a hissy fit for a second, but that's okay. It can do that. Carousel item. There you go. See, I'm abstracting that guy, even though it might reject like the idea, but that's fine. And then again, the same thing that I did with the other one, I'm gonna kind of copy that name. I'm gonna create a CS file for it. So watch this, class razor.cs. Here you go. And then I'm gonna say this is partial, right? And then I'm gonna go and say, take a parameter, prop, render fragment, and then again, the word child content. I have some bad news for you. If you don't say specifically child content, it's not gonna work. It's just programmed like that. Like if you literally call this child content one, it's not gonna work for some reason. It's just programmed this way, right? I don't know what's the logic behind it. I never dug into it, but I learned the hard way. I tried to be cute with the content, said child body content and stuff like that. It just didn't work out. It has to be exactly the word child content. And if you change that, it's just gonna break for some reason. It's just, it is what it is. Okay, so let's go and do that. Let's go and say I want to replace the carousel item with carousel item base like that, and I'm gonna replace that everywhere. Look, here we go. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Here you go. So now I'm working specifically exclusively with base components, but let's just see if it works, right? Here's our Windows machine running this guy. The rest of this should be a string, just a string that we're rendering. There we go. See, that doesn't look like it worked. Something is missing, right? Let's see what's missing for us. This is carousel item base. Oh, you know what's missing? I forgot to go in here and say child content. That's what I forgot to do. Let's try that again. There you go. Now you have a working solution, completely abstract, right? Well, not a working solution, a working POC, right? It's a working POC. So now if I'm on my phone, I can swipe right and left and it will tell me be good to someone, you know, say thank you to someone, whatever the case may be. I want to know what's up with the carousel base thing at the top here. I want to get rid of that. Let's see, where did we go wrong with the carousel base? Let me take away that high, whatever. I think it's in here. Yeah, it's that little header. That's what makes it weird. Okay, cool. There we go. Back at it again. Back at it again with the white vans. There you go. And then totally rendering fine. You can hook up things to it. Now you basically abstracted away third party. So if tomorrow I come and say, I don't want to use Sync Fusion anymore. I want to use Map Blazer or use whatever Mud Blazer or whatever is out there. I don't have to change my core UI. I only have to change my base components. It's abstraction at the UI level, right? But every now and then there will be leakage. I have to be very sincere and honest with you. You're going to have some leakage every now and then, but that's not the case today. Okay, so this is a fully working POC. When you're building POCs, team, it's really advisable that you kind of record. I'm back again. Sorry about that. I keep experiencing some interruptions. I don't know what's going on with StreamYard, but we'll get back to it. I apologize for that. We'll get back. All right. So where were we? I was building the solution to make sure that this works. Here we go. StreamYard can't handle the stream. Okay, so I'm gonna just kind of record a GIF, like a screen to GIF. I like to use that app called Screen to GIF. It runs on Windows. It's a very good app. It kind of helps you kind of get a quick GIFy of your POC, and it allows you to kind of see how the system is working and whatnot. Let me just kind of do a quick run again and see if it can kind of boot up. Yeah, perfect, perfect. You'll notice also something about claiming a free account and setting up a um, a Syncfusion thing. I'll talk to you about that a little bit, but let me just kind of record and create that POC PR so people can kind of see how we manage things. I'm recording just a quick Giphy in here for this. So I'm going to start recording. I'm just kind of basically showing, hey, if you click here, you can basically navigate with this carousel. I'm saving this Giphy. I'm going to save the Giphy and going to put it in the pull request that I'm about to create for this POC. So let's do that. Saving. Let me shut this down. I'm just going to go here and say POC render carousel on home page. Okay, so this is its own PR. Commit all and push. Let's create. I'm gonna create it in the browser this time because I wanna make sure that everyone kind of sees. I wanna attach the image to it. So here's the POC, and then I'm gonna just drop that Giphy that I created right into my PR. So here's a Giphy right here. That's a big file. Try again. Oh, it doesn't like it. Let me see if I can minimize the size of it. Hang tight. I haven't seen that before. Color 64 bits fastest. Sure. Save. Let's see if we can make it smaller. Yeah, screen to GIF for anyone interested. Screen to GIF right here. This is a great app. Go ahead and use it. You know, if you're kind of trying to show people something real quick about an app or a whatever the case may be. Does this work? What's the actual size of this file? Why is it complaining? It's literally 14 megs. Okay, maybe that's too big. I'm not sure. How do we make it smaller? So save looped GIF, use global table. I don't know. I don't want to waste your time figuring out a GIF is GIFing. Maybe I can kill the colors. What if I make the color just 1 or 2? Maybe that'll make it a little bit smaller, hopefully. Processing it. Oh my God, it made it so bad. Well, I'll just do this. I'll take a I'll take a I'll take a screenshot of it. The least I can do is to take a screenshot of it and just kind of put it um in that view. So hopefully that will just do the trick for us. Okay, I'll take a screenshot and just put it there. Since the Giphy is not Giphying, we'll do that. So let's take a screenshot. There you go. Screenshot, drop the screenshot in Git. And I'm going to create a pull request. There you go. So that's a pull request that says, hey, this is a POC. It really works. Look at the code. I want people to kind of pull that down and run it on their local machines and see all that kind of amazing setup that I had to kind of put together. So you kind of start to get your hands dirty with Blazor, Maui. Okay. Okay. Shoot, I shouldn't have merged that actually. Let me revert that. Revert. Create pull request. This is just for POC purposes. It's not supposed to be merged. I just wanted to put it out there for people to kind of see, but I don't want to actually merge it into my code. Yeah, I want to keep my code to production only stuff. So mobile components, it shouldn't have base component. Okay, perfect. Perfect. Okay. Great. Let's take a question. What is the question that's in the chat? It's basically saying, sir, I'm not able to build logic in JavaScript. I've tried a lot, but I always have to rely on AI for help. Well, this is not the JavaScript team. This is the C# team, Zayan. So I personally don't use JavaScript for anything at all, and I haven't in a very, very long time. The beautiful thing about this system that we're building in C# and Blazor is that you don't have to write JavaScript. You can just write C#, right? And um, this is not the right channel for that. But if you're having trouble in general with um, the UI, like writing logic for UI, I really advise you to simplify your logic. Like try to simplify, like try to think in terms of the engineering standard, right? So read about this standard, see how we break software into components, right? Into dependencies and services, and start from there. I'm gonna drop that in the chat for you, Zayan, so you can kind of take a look. But we're definitely not the JavaScript crew. I'll tell you that much. Wrong channel, wrong team. Okay. All right. Let's go back to productionization. So in terms of our architecture, what we're really trying to build is this base component. I already showed you how to do the base component. So what I'm going to do is just to start productionizing that, right? So here's a mobile app. Here's ARK App Mobile. Let's start building base components. So this is actually truly, I'm going to go back to main or master, get latest, and start building base components, and then hopefully write the components. We're going to test drive the components as well. So that's going to be also fun. Let's first install the dependencies that we talked about, right? Remember, we installed a couple of dependencies. Now we're doing the production stuff. So users, Hassan, Habib, bases, and then carousel. I usually would tell you to do the parent in a PR and the child in a PR, but they're kind of, one of them can't exist without the other. So we have to kind of put them together. Let's do Sync Fusion, themes. I'm going to install the themes. Pretty much what we did earlier for the POC, but it was really important for me to show you have to POC and make sure your UI will work for it before you go and build a whole lot of code and then you discover later, oh no, my code actually doesn't work. That would be a bummer, right? So okay, that's the themes part, and I also want to install Sync Fusion navigation because that's where that carousel is. Navigation, install, jump, so it can install. There you go. Are they all installed right now? Let's kind of look at the what has been actually installed. Yeah, we have it. Blazor navigation and Blazor themes right there. Perfect. Perfect. Now I just want to do the setup. So in program, Maui program, I'm gonna go ahead and say Maui app blazor.services.add sync fusion blazor. So that's one. And then the other one was to go into the WW root, pay attention to this one, and basically add in the theme that you're trying to kind of process. And I think I copied that right here. There you go. So now we have both running, and now I can start actually writing the base components, which we have done in the POC. It's pretty much the same thing I just did. So bases like this, and then I'm gonna go and create a razor component, and I'm gonna go and say carousel, CAROU, right? OUSEL, carousel base. There you go. And then I'm gonna create the C# backend of it. This is the productionization part. Now we're past that POC part. There you go. This is a partial. I know we need to pass a parameter, and this parameter can be a render fragment of a child content. Okay, so that's one part. Let's do that. And then I need the SF carousel, right? Carousel, like that. Let's control period to pull that reference. Probably wrote carousel wrong. It's a very hard word for me. CAROUSEL, carousel. Yeah, that should be it. I can't find the reference for some reason, but we'll find it. So using Syncfusion Blazor navigations. That should do it. Okay, what was the name of it? SF carousel. Yeah, I think it's the right one. SF carousel. What did I do wrong? Oh, I forgot to put the A. And then child content right there. Okay, so that's the base. Yep, thank you. Thank you both. Thank you, Ahmed and Mordecai. Perfect. So okay, so that's that guy. Why is this guy complaining? It's basically saying found markup element with unexpected. Is this? Yeah, it's still picking up. Okay. Another base component that I want to create is carousel item, right? So carousel item base, right? Same thing. Carousel item. There it is. And this guy will have child content inside of it. And then I'm going to take out the namespace. Control period will pull the namespace back for you. Come on. There you go. And then I just need the back end of the front end as well, just to make sure everything looks right. So this is add new class file .cs. There you go. And then that guy is also partial. Parameter, prop, render fragment, child content. There you go. Okay. Do I need to register base components? No, I don't think I need to register anything. I think this is solid enough. This is child content, carousel item, carousel base. It's all good. Carousel base, and then this is the carousel. It takes a child content as well. Looks about right. Okay, so that's one PR. Now we're just two components away two steps away from finalizing this whole dealio. And then we sorry again, I keep having trouble with StreamYard. I don't know why, but maybe my internet connection is no good. We'll see. Let's do a quick speed test to make sure the internet connection is running right. So let's see here. Is our internet running proper? Let's see. Hopefully we don't lose the access. Nope, internet is running great. I don't know what's up with StreamYard, but internet is running great. Okay. Let's go back to C#. Here we go. All right. I'm gonna go and say bases and then carousel component base. Let's push that guy upstream. There we go. And then I'm gonna create a pull request. So basis carousel component base looks about right. We installed the dependencies. We added everything. Let's go ahead and add all that. There we go. And then let's go and look at the PR for it. Let's go back here. Let's just take a kind of a quick look at the views, kind of review our own code just to make sure in case we missed anything. I don't think we missed anything. At some point, we need to add a license, right? But I think Syncfusion will allow you to have a license if you have a community application. So there is a community license, and this community license will give you access, right, to everything in Syncfusion for free, right? So you can literally claim a free license from Syncfusion if you want. Here's the example of that. You know, get our entire product line for free, no credit card required. 1900 plus controls and frameworks. So that's what we're basically going to do. We're going to try to go to them and basically, you know, basically just, you know, your ability to tell Sync Fusion, hey, you know, I'm doing this for a community project like this one that we're building, and it will take care of that for you. Okay. Anyway, so we'll take care of that registration later, but for the time being, here's my base components. I'm just going to go ahead and merge this guy, and everything will be just fine. There you go. So okay, so now where are we in the architecture area? Let's go back to our architecture here. This guy now is green. Watch this. It feels so good to kind of accomplish stuff. There you go. So look how far we've come, right? We built all of this. Now we are just two steps away from kind of completing our mobile app, right? So now we are in this phase here where we actually build the actual ARK component. And what this component is going to do is actually very simple. What this component is going to try to do is that it's going to try to get the data from the view service and render that data using these base components. That's all it's going to do. And we're going to test it together. We're going to try it together. But that's basically what an ARK component is. Like what this UI component, it's basically the intersection between your data flow and your UI flow, right? So you have base component page and you have broker service, view service, and then you hit that component where you can basically share that data. So let's start building that component together. Let's go ahead and do this. Let's go back here. Let's go to our favorite, Visual Studio. I'm going to go to the master branch in here and pull latest. Here you go. Okay. And now we're going to start building the components. So under components, we built bases, right? I want to build components. So this is components. I want to build components. Usually I want to change, I want to change this components to views. We can fix that later. We'll take that as a kind of code drop or something. But what is this component that I'm trying to build? I'm trying to build something called ARK component. ARK component. That's the name of it. Acts of random kindness component. And I need to build the back end of it. So I'm going to go ahead in here and say, here's a class, ARK component.razor.cs. Okay, this is basically where all the magic is going to happen. All of what we built so far, I don't know, 10 plus hours, maybe more, leads up to this moment when you kind of do the intersection between your components, right? So I'm going to go here and say this is a partial class. I think it might be okay. If you want to do it, it's up to you. But I think it's called component base. If you do this, this is nice because component base basically says when you do an override on initialize, right? That basically gives the signal to your component that something is happening in your system. Something is already working in your system. We're going to kind of build this together. We're going to attack this together as much as we have time. So here's the beginning of it. I'm going to inject a service in here. It's called the view service, right? So ARK view service. Okay, so that's where I'm going to get the data from. ARK view service, like that. Okay. ARK view service is great, but that's not enough. We need to, so ARK is less accessible. Yeah, because of the internal thing. Okay, sure, internal. Can I make you internal actually? I don't think it'll let me. Okay, fine, let's do that. Let's go here and make this public. Public. Huh. Let's see. Okay, perfect. Does my application build? I want to make sure that it wants to access a public thing. So let's see if we can do that. .NET build. Let's hope it doesn't break anything else. 12 errors. It didn't like it. It basically says Your ARK component razor expected. Oh, there's probably an error somewhere else in the component itself. Oh yeah, that guy. So public like that. Let's try that again. Let's build this guy. While it's building, Nazir says, "What is the next live session? When is the next? Every weekend. Every weekend. Hopefully next Saturday, basically. That would be when. All right. Okay, so we'll let this guy build, but let's just see what else we need. I want to have a carousel base in here. So that's my carousel. That's basically where that data is going to be loaded. Okay, so these are the two things for now, because your components need to have different states, like a loading, content, error states. But I'm going to start with the content and then build up to the other states in that system. Okay. So, okay, so we have a carousel, we have all that, that's great. And I have expectations. I need to start building a unit test for my component. And that unit test for my component is going to basically tell me, okay, perfect, so that built fine. It's going to tell me my expectations start rendering accordingly. So right now I don't have anything in here. Let's go and start building tests for our components, right? So I'm going to go here and say, here's a new folder. And the folder is called components. And under components, I'm testing specifically for ARK components like this. And then I'm going to just create a simple, just like how we do our services, it's the exact same thing. So this is ARK component tests. Okay, so this is me test driving a hybrid Blazor UI component. Okay, this needs to be public and it needs to be partial because we're going to do some stuff with it. But what else do I need to do here, right? Well, in the previous test that we've written, we basically went ahead and we created mocks of the dependencies. We're still going to do the same thing here, but with a slight difference. The only difference here is that testing the components themselves is a little tricky, right? You don't test your components the exact same way you're testing, I don't know, like your normal service. There's just a slight change there, and I want you to just be aware of it. We're going to start with something simple, but then we're going to kind of get a little bit deeper into the details as we progress in that test. For starters, I need to install something called bunit. For those of you who have seen Eagle Hansen and our interviews with him, he's a very smart guy that basically built a framework for testing Blazor components called bunit. That's what the B stands for, Blazor Unit Test. So here's bunit. I don't know how much bunit changed, but I'm actively involved in other projects as well. So it has 7 million downloads, must be great, right? So let's go and install bunit real quick. It's bunit. Installing bunit. There you go. And I'll show you why that bunit is super important in a second. Okay, so bunit kind of pretends to render your application. So all of a sudden, you're going to see something here called test context. Test context like that. I'm going to pull, there you go. So this basically makes your system think that it's running and standing up an entire application, and you're basically registering the services that you need. It's the whole 9 yards, right? But let's just start with our mocks, right? Private read-only mock ARK view service, because that's where we're going to get the data from. So this is ARK view service mock. That's one. What else do I want to do here? I want the component itself. So private read-only, I rendered. I don't think it should be read-only because we're going to change it every single time. So I rendered component, and the component that I'm rendering is ARK component. That's the subject of the test. This is rendered ARK component, just like that. Okay, so far so good. Now let's start with the constructor. Here's my CTOR like this, and just like how we normally register any service, right? This dot ark view service mock equals new mock of iArk view service like this. Now here where it gets a little bit weird, right? you're gonna register that guy. So this dot services, watch, dot add transient, right? And in this add transit, I'm gonna go and say services, and then this dot arc view service component mock dot object. So I'm registering the services that that my component is gonna need to run. And then lastly, because we're using Sync Fusion, I'm gonna go here and say services dot add Sync Fusion Blazor. So these are all the prerequisites that basically you need to stand up a rendering of a component. Basically, that's essentially what it is. Okay, let's just start with our first unit test and then see how far we can take this. This is fun. It's super fun. So I'm gonna go here, instead of logic, we're basically saying render, right? So logic and then render like that. So we're basically rendering the component. And now we need to start writing a unit test. The biggest thing that you want to test when you're writing a unit test for a component, it should render default values. Like when the component is not rendered, you want to make sure that nothing has a pre-existing value in your component, right? So this is a given when, and I'm going to go and say default ARK component equal new ARK component. I'm just really not rendering anything. I just want to make sure that all my existing publicly accessible pieces are null. So carousel should be null because I didn't render anything, right? And what else? The default ARK component dot the service, the view service, ARK view service should be null. I also want to make sure nobody's doing something funny with my view service, right? So I'm going to go here and say this dot mocked service verify no other calls. So that's basically me saying when my component in its initial non-loading, non-content, non-error state, don't do anything with it. Just keep everything flat at its default value. Let's go ahead and run this baby here. Let's do this. It's taking a second. Let's see here, test. Oh, it's still running. It's a little slow. Even for a crazy machine like mine, it's a little slow. I apologize for that. It couldn't be like, it should be a little bit faster, but nah, it is what it is. It's technically standing up a server, so I can understand. Okay, so this passed. Let's create a new branch for this. So users, Hassan, Habib, components, ARK, right? There you go. So this is pass, and this guy should always be passed from the beginning anyway, because you can't fail default components. The idea of this test is to make sure, because some people sometimes they'll go and do something funny like this. They'll go and be like, oh, new this, or default this. You'll see this a lot. We'll do labels and all that kind of stuff, and you'll see that nonsense a lot, a lot, a lot. So you want to make sure that your component is in a good state at rest, at default rest. But here's where it gets interesting. I want to go and say public async task should render ARKs async, ARK views async. That's where it gets interesting, because that's your happy path. That's where you basically want to say, give me the actual application and render these ARKs in this particular application, right? So let's do that. Given when then, and I need a bunch of random ARKs. So ARK views, random ARKs, ARK views, create random ARK views. Okay, let's go and create this one. We need an object filler here, right? Because this time we're not going to do this Euclid law of axioms. This time we're going to basically want to make sure that we're actually just getting a list, right? A list of ARK views. So this is an ARK view like this, and then create ARK view filler, var filler equal new filler of ARK view, and then filler setup. What do I care about here when it comes to that setup? I want to just make sure that on type, because this date time offset thing, it doesn't know how to generate it by itself, right? So we can ignore it, or we could basically say use, and then I don't know, new date time. It doesn't matter, right? And then I'm gonna go back here and say return filler. Maybe it's better if we kind of randomized it just for the purpose. So private static date time offset, create get random date time, and then here is your new date time range, earliest date, new date time dot get value. Okay. Now I can use this guy and just drop it in here, and just be careful. If you drop it like this, it's very different than doing it like this. Like watch this piece. This is like a nice kind of gotcha. So if you do get random date time like this and do this with the parentheses, open close parentheses, it'll basically generate a list of things with the same date one time. But if you throw it like this, it'll give you a different date every single time it generates a new value. Okay, and we want a list of these, so we probably need a count, right? So private static integer get count, get random number, right? And that's your new int range minimum to maximum 10 dot get value. There you go. And then lastly, private static list of ARK views, create random ARK views. There you go. And then this is create ARK view filler dot create. I think this is the one that takes the count. Yeah, get random number. And then you want to say dot to list, right? Dot to list, like that. It's too long. Maybe I'll just scope it because it's better this way. So return, and then I'm going to kind of break it apart. Create. There you go. Dot to list. Okay. So this is going to create a list for me. That's great. Let's go back into my logic here. This get random ARK view is going to be great. And then list ARK view retrieved ARK views. Retrieved ARK views. Right? That's from your random ARK views. Kind of deep clone it if you want to make sure that nothing is kind of being modified. It's up to you. Okay, I don't think you need it because you're not gonna be returning the exact same list of ARK views. I don't think you need it. Let's set up the mock. Set up service. Here we go. And then service dot retrieve ARK views async will return asynchronously the retrieved ARK view. So basically you're saying this is my ARK views and I'm gonna return that. Okay. Now, what are we going to do? We need to render the component, right? Remember, we have to render the component that we talked about. So this dot rendered ARK component, and then I'm going to go say render component, and this is ARK component. That's it. You're rendering this component, and you're getting that guy. Now we get to verify things, right? We get to go and say, when this component has rendered, have we actually made the right calls to render that component? Did we do the right thing to pull everything under that component? So how do we do that? We can basically go here. The easiest thing we can do is to basically go and say this dot mock verify that this service has actually been called. So service dot retrieve all ARK views have been called times once. That's the easiest thing you could start with. But you also want to make sure that when you're rendering that your components are not null. So this dot ARK view component dot instance, watch this, dot carousel should not be null, should not be null. So you want to make sure, did my component actually render? Like when you started the actual call, did your UI component actually render? And then in the last, of course, you want to make sure that you're doing the VNO, right? So mock VNO. We're going to do a little bit more than that. Just hang tight. But I want to kind of walk you slowly through this, because this is very important piece. And I haven't talked about Blazor Maui hybrid ever on my channel. I did talk about the same concepts and standards that I'm using, but never actually showed you how to build a mobile app. So learn this one. Better listen up. They won't teach you this in college. So now let's run this test here and make sure that it fails. And then we're going to evolve the test slowly. Here we go. By the way, on this stream, everything is failing right now. My headset turns off randomly. StreamYard turns off randomly. I'm dealing with my own kind of. I hope everyone still can hear me and everyone's still watching. So I see the views, by the way, here, but I'm not sure, if the voice is still coming through to you. So let me know. Here we go. Just waiting for it to render. Muhammad Samir says it's all great in here. I can hear you. Okay, perfect. Thank you, Muhammad. So this guy is supposed to fail because I basically made the assumption, right, that when the component renders, it's supposed to call that view service, that nice view service that we just built today, and it's going to render it. So is this really going to be the case? I don't know. Let's find out. It should fail. There you go. So this guy failed. Why did it fail? It basically says, I did render the component, but you made an assumption that your carousel should render and it did not. Watch this. Watch this part. Look at the error that came through. It says, hey, I expected when I render your component that your carousel would be instantiated, but it didn't. Right? Let me show you how you make that pass. Watch this. Let's commit this as a failing test first. We're gonna fail that test many times, and I'm intentionally doing it this way so you kind of see how I evolve my requirements, how I make it kind of work. Okay. So now let's make sure this works. So why is this erroring out? Because it says that this carousel is supposed to render something on the screen. But how is C# gonna know that there's something on the screen? I'll show you. Watch this. In here, if you do carousel base like that, and you attach it as a reference, watch this. I'm gonna do it like this for now because we don't have any children, but if you say ref and then carousel like that, that will do the trick for you. Watch. It's gonna fail for another reason, but I want you to see that this is failing on its own. So watch this. Test. There we go. Look at the new error. It's basically saying, hey, okay, I recognize that you have a carousel base in here, but there's a new problem. The new problem is that you told me that you're gonna call the view service, but you actually haven't. See how the unit test is kind of evolving with you and working with you, right? So let's do this. Let's do this. So let's go here. Let's make this pass. It's basically saying, hey, you told me that you're gonna call the service, but you haven't. That's where you want to go and say override uninitialized async And then this on initials, I'm gonna make that call. I'm not gonna do anything with it yet. But here's my ARK view service, retrieve all ARK views async. So it's basically the test requirement stopped at basically saying, hey, I want you to call a view service. Maybe I should put the async before override. I think it works both ways. Maybe. Yeah, there you go. Okay, that's all what the test is asking me to do right now, right? So let's go and run that test. There we go. Ah, now it's passing. Now your unit test is saying, by the way, you have fulfilled all the requirements that I asked for. I asked you that you render the carousel component, and I asked you that you call that view service. That's the pieces, the ingredients of this thing that I'm trying to build. But that's not enough. I want this guy, the data of this guy, to render right inside of this guy. So how are we going to do that? How are we going to do that little piece? Let's first mark this test as pass, and then I'm going to tell you what we're going to do. So this is a pass. This is all great progress. I know I'm taking it extremely slow. Like if you saw with the services, I'm just kind of just banging code together. But I really want you to see what this is like. Okay, so there's more then, because now I want to make sure that there is at least the same amount of components that were generated for every view service that I created, like every single view service. So watch this. In here, I can basically go and say rendered ARK component that find components, right? I'm basically saying watch and see if there is a carousel item base. How many of these do you have? This guy returns what? It should return a list, a read-only list of I-rendered components. So let's do this. Let's create a variable in there. Introduce local variable. And this is rendered carousel component items. We're going to dig a little bit more into them in a second, but I just want you to walk really slow with me and see what I'm doing here. Okay. This name is super large, by the way, but we can fix that. Okay. What does this do? It's going to go and say, have you rendered any carousel item based components? Okay. You told me that you rendered the carousel, but what about the items inside that carousel? Have you rendered any of them? Ideally, if this is working as expected, rendered carousel items dot count should, watch this, count should be what? The same count as the items that I returned from where? From the view service. So that retrieved components like this, these guys should be the same size. That's just the bare minimum saying, have you rendered the exact same amount of carousel items that match the ARK views that I've returned to you over the network, right? So let's see. Let's do this. Let's go and run this test. Aha, now it's failing. What does it say? It says, I expected the count to be 7, but I found 0. I found 0. You didn't render anything. You didn't render any of these components. Okay, how do I fix that problem? Let's go here. Let's make that test fail like this. And then let's go back to our component, which is my ARK component right here. Watch what I'm going to do now. Okay, you have this ARK component right here, the carousel base. Okay, great. I want to render inside. A lot of people will go do this for each, right? A lot of people will go and say view in this.ark view, whatever, service, whatever, and they're going to start doing that craziness, writing C# right inside of their markup. That's a very bad idea. Please don't do that. That's a very bad idea. What you probably should do instead, watch this, is you're going to use a component, but we need an additional property first. Where's that additional property? I'm going to go ahead and say list of ARK view, and this is my ARK views. ARK views. It means that I need to update my tests a little bit. I need to make sure that my tests are actually running, but I'll get back to that part. There's this really cool library that I have developed, and then Mabruk basically took it, one of the members of the Stainer community, they took it to a completely new level. They took it in a completely different world, right? What they did there, the library is called it's not Sharp Styles. Sharp Styles will help you with the I forgot my own I forgot my own library names. Okay, hold on. So too many of them, you start forgetting which is which. So there's Sharp Styles, and then there's another library called Pretty Blazer. That's right. Pretty Blazer. There you go. And Pretty Blazer is gonna do this. Let's see here. Here's Pretty Blazer. It has 48,000 downloads, and its creator doesn't remember its name. That's how confused I am. Let's do this. Apply. What does Pretty Blazer do for you? It's going to take a list of items and render them for you in a markup fashion. So watch this. Iterations. Watch. You're writing markup, but it's actually doing something for you. Watch this. And then data source, items, and then you're basically going and saying ARK views, and then you're naming the context as a ARK view, right? And for every single one of these iterations, you're rendering one. And I'm gonna intentionally just say carousel item base and leave it there, because my test didn't require me to do anything with the components that I'm iterating over. Okay, so let's see if that works. Let's go back to our test here. This is fun. I hope you're having fun. So let's go and run this. Technically, that should work. Unless I forgot how BUnit works, I think it should work. Or it will break. I don't know. We'll see. Give it a second there. Give it a second. Sorry about the delay. It's just a slow machine. I'm using the slow machine to talk to my friend on the side, which is great. Just running multiple things at the same time, but it should almost be there. There you go. So it didn't like something. What did it say? Object reference is not set to an instance of an object. And what this is basically saying is saying, because we don't have a loading state yet, it tries and tries to access this list. So for the time being, this is not a final solution. And I told you earlier, don't do that. But for the time being, and until we have a loading state, this is going to be the solution for it. But we're going to get to that part real quick. Hang tight. There we go. Do we have a new error? What's the new error? It's basically saying expected render carousel component items that count to be 7, but found 0. So now it's still complaining. So there's still something missing that basically says, I'm not getting, oh, do you know why that's happening? Because we never assigned the ARK views to the call. So it should probably act this way. So again, unit tests will kind of save your butt big time. Now let's run it one more time. This time, I can guarantee you this is going to work. God willing, we'll see. Inshallah, we'll see. There you go. So this test is basically saying what? Hey, you retrieved a mocked bunch of ARK views, and I picked them up and I rendered them one by one, just like that. But the test is still incomplete, and I'm going to tell you why it's incomplete. Because I want to actually make sure that inside that ARK component, I actually rendered the values of the ARK. Right? The values of the ARK itself need to be rendered. We'll get to that part real quick. So that's pass right here. Okay, can we actually dig? Let's go back to our test. So look at our component here. I basically went and said, go and do a bunch of iterations and iterate, but I didn't put anything inside that carousel item base. And it's very hard to capture this as a reference. So there is no way for us to do so. But what we can do is to basically try to see the HTML inside that guy, the HTML inside that guy, and see if it actually rendered any template, any HTML at all. So let's see if that works. We're going to go back to our test here. So instead of doing that count thing was only for the purpose of showing you I'm progressing, right? Instead, I'm going to start doing this for each I rendered component carousel item base rendered carousel item in is probably the longest of them all. Let's take that to the next level. I also want to take this one to the next. It's kind of bothering me a little bit. There, here, much better like that. Don't let your methods have a billy like that. It's kind of weird. So okay, so for each and every one of these, what I want to make sure of is that every single item in these rendered carousel item components, the actual content, the act of the item has actually rendered. So how do we find out about that? There's many different ways that we can kind of slice this. We can go and say, okay, this rendered carousel item dot is it the content the instance dot, oh, it's the markup, I think. Markup matches like that, right? And inside that markup matches, we can basically figure out, can I just pass a simple string that says, does it have that particular value in it, right? This is a very simple way of doing that. We could probably do it even this way for each, let's do this, for each ARK view in expected ARK views or retrieved ARK views like that. I can basically go and say, okay, find me in these rendered ARK components. So this dot rendered carousel items dot any item, watch this, and then item dot markup contains what? The ARK view dot act. ARK view dot act. So that's basically me saying, show the act. Show the act inside. Does any of these items have a one-to-one match with the act that's coming through that ARK view rendered component? Of course, this one here is going to fail because now I introduced a new condition. So let's see if that works. Here we go. Come on, you got to fail. You have to fail. Oh, wait, I didn't actually verify anything. That's right. So let's see, Boolean. This should return a Boolean, right? So contains act should be true, like that, because that any will return. It says, does it have the acts that you have in your UI, right? So now let's try this one more time. I was like, what? Why did this guy pass? Did I forget how to write software? Maybe. Let's see. Ah, there you go. It says I expected it to be true, but it's false. Why it's false? Because I didn't render inside that component. I didn't render anything inside that component. So this guy will fail again, right? See how the test is starting to evolve slowly but surely. We started with nothing, and now we have a lot of things. Inside that ARK component now, I'm going to have to do something else. So this carousel base is no longer fulfilling to the conditions that we have. So carousel item base. Now I am forced to go in here and basically say ARK view dot act. I think the context here, how do we do this? I think I have to just do at ARK view like that. I think, ARKview.act, like that. Context, hang tight, I'll fix it for you. Is it just like this? Yeah, there you go. Arc view here is basically the equivalent of you if you saying for each, and you're basically naming a variable, right? So this is me saying, okay, go ahead and render this arc view.act. We might need to do an HTML rendering something. I don't know. We'll see. We'll make that test pass and then I'll tell you. Here we go. Here we go. Didn't like it. Let's see why I didn't like it. So this here is basically saying I'm supposed to have inside of your markup, it should have the act, the value of the act. And this is all randomized, right? These values are all randomized. We don't actually know what they are because we're testing behaviors, right? So let's put a breakpoint here and see what these guys actually look like. I'm going to do a debug here and let's actually see what they look like. Maybe the markup is not the right one that I'm looking at here. So we'll see. So rendered item components, quick watch. It doesn't, of course, it doesn't show you. I have to add watch so you can see it on the screen. Here you go. I'm going to open this up. We're going to look at the markup. This is the component instance right here, right? That's for each and every single item component. And I'm basically checking the item dot markup. So that's basically what I'm looking at. It's not in the instance itself. It's right here. And the item markup is actually coming back empty because it didn't find anything in there. But do the acts that we have any value in them? Maybe we forgot that part. So you have to kind of question. So let's add this one to the watch as well. And let's see. So these are the rendered. These guys must have some acts in it. Yeah, there you go. You have acts right here. So the thing is that it didn't actually render it. And why did it not render it? We're gonna have to figure that out right now because that's the problem that we have. Here we go. Let's go into the ARK component. I'm assuming I just need to do this, ARK view that act, and that will solve all my problems. Maybe, we'll see. Nope, it doesn't like that either. And also, more interestingly, it doesn't seem to have any of the HTML at all. So just for the purpose of just testing, I'm just gonna do this. I'm gonna say label like that and then XYZ and see if anything at all comes out of it. Just to make sure that the library is actually rendering these child items and showing it on the screen. There you go. So this is the rendered items, quick watch. No, not quick watch. I have to do the added watch, but I already have it in here, right? So this is the watch right here. And then we're going to extend this, see how the number changes every single time. And then there is the instance. So there's markup in here, and that markup is still coming back as empty. Interesting. And I don't see results view. This is all empty. So it didn't really do. What about child content inside this guy? Does it have anything? Because if it's anywhere, it would be inside that child content, right? So let's see here. Instance, child items. And I think they're all the same because we hard coded. Yeah, first render markup and then markup. And it basically didn't catch. And this is the render count. Huh, interesting. Let's see if we can do a quick query, quick AI query and see why that is. So it's probably a very simple thing, but we should probably investigate. I know that this child content is passed in there, and I know that we're passing it as a parameter. So I have access, I should have access to this child content, and I know that this rendering should happen. Okay, let's do it. Let's go here and do it. Let's see. We'll get to the bottom of it. Let's see. So in Blazor, using bunit, what was the find component? Component returns the right amount of items in a list, but I can't access the markup. Let's see what AI says. There's a list, markup, parent child, item.markup. Okay, we did that. If the component only renders child counter or is a wrapper, its own markup is empty. Bunit does not recursively render the markup of a child. It's a little buggy bug. That's what it is, because it's basically saying, I don't know how to recursively loop within. This is probably something for Eagle Hansen to talk to him about. But it's what this is basically saying is that if you have nested values within, I'll probably not gonna be able to help you out. So how do we do this? We can pass the value as just an input parameter to this component and see if that works for now. But in another session, we're gonna want to make sure that this actually doesn't become the case. Let's try this. Let's do a quick change. Let's adjust real quick. See, test-driven development will force you to think in these terms, which is kind of awesome, right? So I'm gonna go ahead and say, here's a parameter and public string value. So this is just a value that I want to render on the screen. And instead of this child content, I'm just going to put here the value that I want to render. And now I want to basically go back into my code and basically say, instead of doing all that junk, let's just go in here and say the item dot instance dot value, right, equals ARKview dot act. Okay, and then let's go back to our component, and instead of doing that part, let's go and say, here we go, like this, but the value here, hopefully value is not a reserved thing or anything, so it's ARKview.act. Let's just start from here and then kind of evolve it. We'll see how we're going to evolve it. So here's a test. There we go. There you go. It's happy. Now it's basically saying, yes, the values that you asked me to render are actually rendering, right? And you passed it as a parameter instead of passing it within as a kind of an HTML or markup. And now I can see it one-to-one. I can see it. So that's great. That's fantastic. Now we are almost on top of the hour, the third hour of this stream. So I'm gonna leave this PR in a kind of draft state, and we're gonna finish the rest of it hopefully next week, right? The idea here is that I want you to also see the loading and content screen, and I get capped up at 4 hours usually. I don't think that'll be enough time for us, but this is great progress. We're basically sitting right at this part of the architecture right here. And hopefully by next week, we wrap up this guy, and then we start pushing into Google Play and App Store. If you want to see, the progress that I have so far on this PR specifically, I'm going to put it for you up here in a draft PR so you can see it. Let's pull that in here. Here's this guy. Just a second here. Here's this guy right here. ARK. Just trying to find the flow for you. Mobile. There you go. There you go. So I'm going to create this draft PR, which basically, right? Create draft pull request. There you go. So you get to see all these unit tests that we wrote together in the commit history, but also you get to see the code and how we kind of talked to a view service, how we made that view service kind of render on the screen and whatnot. We still have some more finishing and fitting. We want this to look really nice on the mobile app. So we need to talk about styles, and we need to talk about fonts, and maybe we need to include images. We'll see all these fun things that we need to do. Passing these as parameters, passing these access parameters is actually fine too, because it's still HTML that you're passing over the wire, and you're going to have to render later. So hopefully this session is a little bit useful for you. I hope you enjoyed this. Make sure you tune in next week for another session. If you have any comments, questions, or concerns, feel free to drop a comment in the comment section, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you for joining our stream. Take care, everyone.